Good evening, participants. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening, everybody. Nice to see you today.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good evening.
ma'am.
Yes, we've had to mute everybody to ensure that there is smooth progress during the session. Most of you were already part of our previous session, so you are familiar with the rules. So kindly ensure that you keep yourselves on mute throughout the session, unless the host unmutes you. All right? Thank you so much. We will begin in 3 minutes from now. If you have any queries, please put it in the chat box. Yes, Rohan, I know you've posted a query in the chat box. Okay, all of you are saying good evening. I hope you had a good day at school today. We will be introducing our speaker shortly. Kindly lower your hand if you don't have a question right now. I request all of you to kindly lower your hands. Thank you. We have disabled the chat to ensure that there's no disturbance during the program, because we want all of you to be actively listening and not getting distracted by the messages in the chat box. We will enable the chat in our Q&A session so that you can post your questions to our keynote speaker. Kindly ensure that you fill in your attendance sheet. It will be shared to you in the chat box right now, just like how you did in our first session. Please ensure that you sign up your attendance on the Google Sheet that will be shared in the chat box. I hope you all have received it. Please ensure that you do it now. All right, it's 6 o'clock on the dot. Sir, if you're ready, with your permission, can we begin the session?
Yes, please.
Yes,
Let's
all
begin.
right. Good evening to our spot preliminary qualifiers. I'm your host, Siobhan, and it's wonderful to see all of you again and spend time with you. Welcome to our second session of the Vikram Sarabhai Science Foundation Science Promotion Orient Test Virtual Classroom. Just like we ran through our rules for the next session, just give me a minute. Yes, our housekeeping rules. I hope you all remember the rules. Not too many of them were followed last time, but please ensure that we follow all of these rules this time. So our session will last for about an hour. Please ensure that your microphones are on silent or on mute, except when the host unmutes you. We request all the students to actively listen and participate in the session. And kindly refrain from doodling on the screen or in the chat box unless a question is asked, all right? Because it is a disturbance. I know all of you are extremely enthusiastic and you have a lot of questions. You're extremely curious, but kindly refrain from posting in the chat box unless asked. Now, before we move into introducing our keynote speaker, I would like to tell you about our topic for today. So our topic for today is entitled Climate Change, Yesterday, Today, and Tomorrow. Now, this is a topic all of you are familiar with, all of us are familiar with, because the Earth's climate has always been changing, right? Changes in the Earth's orbit, the energy output of the sun, volcanic activity, geographic distribution of the Earth's land masses, and other internal or external processes have been influencing our climate. Now, this natural progression of our climate change is what we term as natural climate change. Now, as a result of this, the Earth has experienced the Ice Age, which I'm sure all of you have read or sort of Googled it up. The Ice Age, when glaciers covered the largest parts of the Earth's surface. And our Earth has also experienced warmer periods where the sea levels were much higher than they are now. But why have environmentalists or sociologists begin studying climate change more in detail? Because it's not the only, the natural change of the climate has not been the only reason why our climate has been changing, right? Scientific observations and models indicate that the Earth's climate is now changing due to human activity. And by human activity, it means things that you and I have been doing over a period of time, which has resulted in climate change. So from diminishing snow and ice to increasing temperatures, rising sea levels, like I also mentioned before, to more frequent and destructive extreme weather events, climate change is happening. And unfortunately, with a heavy heart, I have to say it is man-made. Now, the impacts of climate change is devastating and disastrous for natural and human systems, and it poses an existential threat to human civilization. So why do you and I have to study or learn or sort of try and figure out ways in how we can prevent climate change by man-made activities, right? And to introduce you into our topic and to answer your questions and to give you a deeper insight, it is an absolute honor to introduce our keynote speaker for today. As you can see the name on the screen, Mr. Rituraj Phukan. He is an environmental writer, adventurer, a TEDx speaker, and a naturalist based out of Assam. He is the founder of the Indigenous Peoples Climate Justice Forum and also serves as the vice president of the American-based Grassroots Coalition for Environmental and Economic Justice. He is a member of the National Union for Conservation of Nature and sits on the board of society groups in the Americas, Europe, and Australia. He is also the founder of the Indigenous Peoples Climate Justice Forum. Now, Mr. Phukan has personally experienced the impacts of climate change in the polar frontiers of Arctic and Antarctica and in the Himalayas and across India. He was personally trained as climate reality leader by Nobel laureate Al Gore and was featured in the former United States Vice President's 2017 book, An Inconvenient Sequel, Truth to Power. He was an accredited observer at the UN Climate Conference, COP26 in Glasgow, which was conducted in November 2021, and has recently been selected as a European Climate Pact Ambassador. So we are overjoyed to have you with us, and I please request you to take over the session.
Thank you very much, Shivan. And it's such a pleasure to be here to see over 500 young minds joining this session. And I'm going to share my screen.
All right. Yes, I will let you know as soon as I can see it.
Okay.
Yes, it's visible, sir.
Right. So taking up from where Shivan Miss has just now ended about climate change impacts on the planet and what it entails for human civilization, for life on Earth, and what you can do as young people who are going to inherit this planet, who have to live with climate change. what you people can do. So we will make it very interactive. As soon as I finish my presentation, I hope to see a lot of questions about what you can do and about the different kind of impacts that we are seeing already, especially in India. So let me start with this photograph of the planet Earth. This photograph, by the way, is known as the blue marble. It was taken from exactly halfway between the Earth and the Moon by the last Apollo mission in the 1970s, just before the start of the modern environmental movement. Earth, they started in 1970, and then in 1972, we had the first World Environment Day. So this photograph had a lot of impact on human civilization, on our understanding of the Earth and current understanding of how climate change is changing everything that is existing on this blue marble. So first, let me start with this question. If I was there, I'm sure all of you would be giving your own opinions about what is your favorite animal. Usually, I find a lot of variety of answers, and some of them, the most popular ones are tiger, elephant, birds, even some people say snakes, penguins, and every time I ask the question here in Assam, a lot of students like yourself say rhino, because a lot of rhinos live here in Assam, where I live. So let us look at some of the impacts, what is happening with the wildlife on our planet. Every 2 years, the Living Planet report is released by WWF, which is the Worldwide Fund for Nature. And the last report in 2020 said that we are losing almost half of, we have already lost almost half of the total global populations, and 2/3 are declining. 2/3 of all species of birds and amphibians, reptiles, and fish on this planet are declining. And then they related this unprecedented loss of biodiversity to the same environmental destruction that has led to the emergence of diseases, zoonotic diseases like COVID-19, diseases that have jumped from animals to human beings. They include a lot of them, including diseases like malaria, SARS, KERS, and so on and so forth. This can be a good assignment. You can look at what are the diseases that have jumped from wild animals to human beings. And you'll find that almost all of them have happened in the past 20, 30 years. The International Union for Conservation of Nature. This is one of the leading organizations in the world which maintains a list of species which are endangered. Unfortunately, about 1,30,000 now are on the red list. That means on the verge of extinction. Now, all of you know that if an animal goes extinct, we cannot bring it back. Human beings may be the most intelligent being on the planet. We can cause the extinction of species, but we cannot bring back. If it is gone, it's gone forever. Just like the dinosaurs, which used to exist, we cannot bring back the dinosaurs, even if we wanted to, right? A lot of our favorite animals are on the list, and river dolphins, which many young people love to count among their favorite animals, are also on the list of extinction. So why is it happening? We just heard your ma'am talking about climate change. Now let's look at the basics. Why is there life on Earth? In ecological terms, we call it the Goldilocks principle. You know the story of Goldilocks and the three bears. Just like the story, life exists on Earth because the conditions are just right. It is not too far from the sun. It's not too close to the sun. So it makes it just perfect, about 14 degrees Celsius temperatures, which makes life possible. It's not too not too hot, not too cold, and we have the right mixture of gases, carbon dioxide, nitrogen, oxygen, etc., which makes life on Earth possible. However, because of climate change, a lot of the bioclimatic envelope that species need to survive is shifting. That means different wildlife species are forced to move. For example, why are some penguins found only in certain places? Mostly people think that penguins are only found in Antarctica, but well, penguins are also found in Australia, New Zealand, Africa, South America. But if we talk about the Antarctic, this is the emperor penguins in the Geology archipelago. This colony actually has shifted even within the Antarctic. It has shifted by about 5 kilometers in the last 20 years since the movie, The March of the Penguins, was made. Why is that happening? Because the bioclimatic envelope, which is required by a certain species to thrive, to reproduce, is changing. It's becoming warmer and warmer. To understand that better, scientists have been studying a lot of animals, marine animals as well as terrestrial animals, and they found that in both the hemispheres, in the northern hemisphere as well as the southern hemisphere, animals in the sea and on land are slowly migrating away from the equator and towards the polar regions. Here you are seeing a purple sea urchin, zooplankton, and the whale shark, which is the world's largest fish. And these are all marine species in the southern hemisphere, which are found to be migrating slowly away from the equator and towards the South Pole. Similarly, in the northern hemisphere, these three terrestrial species, the blue Argus butterfly, uh, the European pica, and the Cetus warbler, which is the bird here, these are all three animals in the northern hemisphere which are found to be slowly migrating towards the North Pole. Of course, not all animals can migrate just because it gets hotter. For example, let's look at our national animal, the Royal Bengal tiger. Now, suppose the nature of the forest in which a tiger lives changes. Suppose the grass no longer grows in certain parts of the forest. What happens? The deer that lives there will migrate to another part of the forest where the grass is more readily available, right? However, the tigers are very, very territorial. They are fiercely protective of the territory which they inhabit, and they will not share it with another tiger or another big cat, uh, whether it's a leopard or a tiger. So there will be a fight and one of them will be killed. So it becomes very difficult for predators to actually migrate to favorable territories. And the second challenge is that most of the forest habitats left on this planet are all not connected, right? They have been divided because many forests have been cut down in different parts of the country, and we do not have enough suitable habitats for animals like the tigers to migrate to. A lot of other animals that comes to mind immediately are facing the consequences of climate change already. This is a rhino, I talked about it. This is found mostly in Assam, but it's also found in places like Nepal. And in Nepal, a WWF study predicted that all the rhinos will actually migrate into India because the grass line is shifting slowly to the south. They do not want that to happen because Nepal still wants to say that we also have rhinos, but unfortunately, the animals do not know national boundaries or boundaries of forest areas. So when they migrate, it makes them more vulnerable to poaching as well. Similarly, elephants are one of the worst affected victims of climate change because they are very, very susceptible to heat strokes, heat stress. So if it becomes too hot, they become angry. They need a lot of water. They need about 200 liters of water every day. And they need a lot of food as well. So if the grass disappears, the elephants will come into human habitation, and there are a lot of conflicts. In Assam, for example, there are hundreds of people who are killed by elephants every year. And similarly, a lot of elephants are also killed in conflict when they come out from this protected forest areas. Now, I always say that water is the local issue of global climate change, and it is true for both people and for biodiversity. And look at these newspaper headlines from India. There are conflicts in the forest that we are seeing now between tigers and elephants, between monkeys, and it is all for water, because water, as you all know, is life. Without water, no animal can survive. Uh, There's another pathetic photograph, very sad, from last year. A lot of giraffes died in Africa because of lack of water. And 2 or 3 years back, again, 200 elephants died because of lack of water. So these are things that we do not want to see, but unfortunately, it is happening in our world. A few years back, the IPCC came out with this report about why we need to limit warming, global warming, to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Unfortunately, our planet is already warmer since the pre-industrial times by about 1.3 degrees Celsius. And we have a huge chance of passing that 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold in the next 20 years. And if that happens, the IPCC, which is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change formed by the United Nations Convention on Climate Change, predicts that about 8% of vertebrate animals will lose their current range, current habitat, places where they live. And then the big change, 16% of plants would lose at least half their range. So a lot of vegetation change is happening. I just talked about a vegetation change. When the grass disappears, then the deer is moving, and then it affects the tigers. And similarly, if the grass disappears, then the rhinos, they are going to migrate to another place. So all these changes is going to have a huge consequences on human well-being as well, because of course, we depend on we depend on nature for the food we eat. The IPCC also predicted that insect populations will lose out very badly. In fact, we have already documented that in some places, up to 96% of insects have been lost. And insects are very, very important, and we'll have a look at that in another slide. But coming to favorite animals, my favorite is, of course, the polar bear. And there's a reason for it. I believe the polar bear represents perhaps the most wild of all animals on this planet. They live in the most inhospitable, cold areas of the Arctic. And two of these photographs on the right-hand side with the big fat polar bear sitting on the green tundra grass, and the one below that were both taken by me on two different expeditions to the Arctic. On the top, of course, the polar bear looks very satisfied. It has enough food, and in the bottom, the snow has actually been, covered with black soot, and it has darkened. So the polar bears there are very, very stressed out. And then in some areas, they're migrating into human areas and then eating garbage, like you see in the top left, which is very, very unfortunate. The polar bear is very, very vital to the ecology of the Arctic. For example, you see the small Arctic fox following the polar bear. It survives on what the polar bear leaves behind after hunting. So all the web of life, in all the animals are related to each other, dependent on each other in nature. And therefore, when we take out a species, or if we lose a species to extinction, it causes a lot of problems for the entire ecosystem. In 2019, in the month of June, about 200 of this beautiful Svalbard reindeer had died because of starvation. And you'd be surprised to know why. Because it rained in the Arctic. When it rains in the Arctic, it's very, very cold. And after a few minutes, about 30 minutes or so, the rain becomes hard ice. And these deer are not able to dig through the ice. They are more adapted to digging through the soft snow. And because the hard ice covered most of the grass and they could not eat and they all starved to death. Now, I took part in a lot of studies about how the ecosystem is changing, and small organisms which make up this ecosystem are actually affected by slight changes in temperature. And because of that, the entire Arctic ecosystem is slowly changing. And that is bad news for the climate of the world as well as the future of human beings. We have lost almost all of the species that survived the extinction of the dinosaurs. About 50% of amphibians, which have been living on this planet from before the time of the dinosaurs, are now disappearing, and that is not good news for us. That means the health of the planet is really bad. Similarly, about 50% of whales and other marine vertebrates have disappeared because the oceans are slowly turning acidic. And that is because the oceans absorb about 90% of the extra heat that is happening because of climate change. When the oceans become acidic, a lot of animals, marine animals, their shells are destroyed. And when these shells are destroyed, they die, and then other animals like the salmon and mackerel and herring, which depend on this, snails, for example, are also their populations are also decreased. That means the entire oceanic ecosystem is lost. And a lot of fishermen depend on all this oceanic produce for their livelihoods. That means it is having a direct impact on human beings. Now let's talk about a bit about the birds. Now birds are considered to be as keynote species for the environment. And during the Paris Agreement in 2015, the world signed the first ever climate change agreement, and that is known as the Paris Agreement. So during that same time, this book was published called The Messengers: What Birds Tell Us About Threats from Climate Change and Solutions for Nature and People. And this was the first time when the world realized that the worst affected areas on our planet have seen a dramatic decline in the population of wild bird species. And now how birds are behaving are considered to be key indicators of climate change in that area. These are some of the reasons, some of the reports that have come out since that publication of the Messengers. Birds are also shifting towards the poles, and there is disrupted interaction between predators and birds of prey. As you know, some birds are hunters, whereas some smaller birds are hunted. So all that is changing. Similarly, the timing of migration, breeding, and food supply is also changing. So overall, all over the world, we are seeing a huge decrease in population of birds. Thomas Lovejoy was one of the greatest biologists who just passed away last month, and he had something very nice to say about birds. If you take care of birds, you take care of most of the environmental problems in the world. I really like this quote, so therefore I am using it here. The most important species on this planet perhaps are the insects. Now imagine there are 30,000 bee species in the world. So what happens if the bees disappear? All of you know that bees are pollinators. They are very vital for about 40% of fruits and vegetables that is grown on this planet. So without a world without bees is going to be very, very difficult for human beings, because we will lose a lot of food security. More people will go hungry. There will be famines in many areas of the world. And some of your favorite fruits and vegetables will not be found anymore. Some places on Earth has actually seen a 98% decline in insect mass in the last 35-40 years, which is really, really dramatic. And it is going to affect food security in the future. And there are many, many reports which are already there, which have studied this. So to summarize, what is happening? Nature is declining. So what is nature? I really believe that nature is not outside of us. I believe that we are nature, we are part of nature, and we must think ourselves to be part of nature. To be good human beings, we must ensure that this decline of nature is addressed. The future is actually in your hands as young people. You have to understand this and believe that you are all a part of nature and work together to restore nature. To read more about how different species are being affected by climate change, you can go on and read this. If you find this book somewhere, you're most welcome to read it. This is known as this is a Climate Abundant. It was a #1 bestseller. I wrote the chapter on biodiversity impacts in this book. So for the teachers who may be here, there is this beautiful website called subjecttoclimate.org. If you go here, you'll find a lot of ready-made lesson plans where you could integrate whatever subject you are teaching, whether it's geography or mathematics or English, with climate change lesson plans. There are this is a free website. Always you can all use it, and for the students as well, you can go and find a lot of presentations here which will help you understand the interconnected issues between climate change, biodiversity, and solutions. Now, moving on, what do we do about this climate change? What do we do about this biodiversity loss? The Global Biodiversity Outlook, as well as many other agencies like the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, agree that a lot of our solutions to the climate change problem, to the biodiversity loss problem, are in nature. We must restore nature. We must transition from the destructive ways we produce food to more sustainable systems of agriculture, to food production. We must stop the exploitation of fisheries around the world. Cities must be transformed into greener infrastructure. And all this understanding we have developed since COVID has emerged, that the health of the planet is one. We will be healthy, humans will be healthy if nature is healthy, if the planet is healthy. So that is a belief that the entire world is now looking towards, to ensure that we are able to solve these problems of climate change and biodiversity before it is too late. And a lot of these, it depends on how young people respond to it. Therefore, the United Nations last year started this decade called the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. And around the world, students are taking up, they're doing whatever they can do on their own, and also support the adults. And this entire generation is known as Generation Restoration. This is the hashtag that is being used by students around the world. Last year, we also had something called the Rewilding Day by the Global Alliance for Rewilding on March 20th. And this year we'll have that. So what is rewilding? Rewilding is nothing but helping nature heal itself. It is about the way we think. It's about understanding that we are one species on, we are part of the web of life, and we must support the soil, the fresh water, the oceans, and all other creatures that live on this planet in order to ensure the future and well-being of humans on this planet. Can we do it? Well, my friend, the Forest Man of India, Jada Payang, has shown that it can be done. If you do not know him, please look him up. He started planting trees on a barren island in the middle of the Brahmaputra River about 40 years back. And for 30 years, nobody knew about that. It was a herd of elephants which came into the city of Jorhat, which brought the attention of people to the existence of his forest, which, by the way, is home to Royal Bengal tigers, rhinos, elephants, and hundreds of species of birds. and now he's world famous. So he has shown to the world how restoration can be done. He has shown to the world how rewilding can be done. And if one man can do it, then all of us can definitely do it collectively. Now, what can you do as young people? Some of you must be thinking, okay, I am only 9 years old, I'm only 10, or I'm only 11, or I'm only 12. But I'm going to show you a few young people, as young as you, who actually made the world stop and think and act. And they are some of the most inspiring environmental leaders that the world has ever seen. First, the girl who silenced the world for 5 minutes. At the age of 12, Saverne Kali Suzuki went to Rio de Janeiro, the first ever Earth Summit in 1992. And along with other young people like Michelle Keeg, Vanisha Sethi, Morgan Gessler, she presented a speech which silenced the world leaders. And this is part of the speech. You don't know how to fix the holes in our ozone layer. You do not know how to bring salmon back up a dead stream. You do not know how to bring back an animal now extinct. And you cannot bring back forests that once grew where there is now desert. If you do not know how to fix it, please stop breaking it. Very powerful message. And she was only 12 years old when she gave this hugely inspirational speech to world leaders at the first Earth Summit in 1992. Felix Pinkbeiner was only 9 years old when he started this NGO, this group called Plant for the Planet. And his aim was to plant 1 million trees. He started in Germany, but his organization has grown to over 100 countries. Perhaps almost every country in the world, all the 196 countries now have a branch of Plant for the Planet, and they have planted more than 100 million trees already. And he was only 9 years old. Imagine when he started this. Margie was only 17, and she has written this book called Youth to Power, about how young people have impacted the environmental movement and how they can act and motivate and inspire action on climate change. And now, of course, the whole world is talking about net zero, and her organization, Zero Hour, actually started talking about net zero before anybody else. Then we have our own young Indian champion, Redhima Pandey, 5 years back in 2017. And as she continues to lead the fight, 2 years back when she was 12, she actually joined Greta Thunberg and other young people to file a case at the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, asking for government action around the world. There are a lot of other young people who have taken to litigation, who have filed cases in different countries, from the US to New Zealand to Pakistan, and in many other European countries, to ensure that their respective governments take environmental action, take action on protecting forest and biodiversity, as well as climate action. Now, the most famous, of course, is School Strike for Climate in Norwegian, and the person holding it is Greta Thunberg. I think all of you know her, and she was very determined to ensure that her government listens. Of course, now she's world famous, and She has inspired a movement called Fridays for Future and many other movements actually around the world, where many millions of young people have come out on the streets. We will go to school if you keep the climate cool. Just look at these slogans. There is no planet B. What we are standing here, we are standing there. So all of these people, this planet is getting hotter than young. And look at these movements are why governments are forced to act, why governments are forced to take climate action around the world. She was, of course, named a Time Person of the Year a few years back, and she has been nominated several times for the Nobel Peace Prize since 2019 every year. And then she won many other awards. And she just turned 18 last year, so she's really young. And because of the young people's dedication, because of the young people's movement out on the streets demanding climate action, the UN Secretary General himself was forced to come out with a statement: "My generation has failed to respond properly to the dramatic challenge of climate change. This is deeply felt by young people. No wonder they are angry." So this is an acknowledgement of the power of the youth. And therefore, the United Nations actually started this engaging youth in the climate change negotiations. There was a UN Youth event which took place in the United Nations Youth Climate Summit a few years back. And now the youth are part of the movement in every negotiations. Now I'm going to end with a couple of slides about by some of my favorite climate leaders. One of them is Robert Swan, who was the leader of two of my expeditions, one to the Antarctic and one to the Arctic. And he says the greatest threat to the planet is the belief that someone else will save it. That means that all of us, all of you, all of your parents and teachers, all of you have a role to play. All of you must act. You must think that it is my planet and I'm going to do it, and do whatever you want, whatever you can, just like Jada Payang did, the forest man of India. When he started planting, nobody was talking about rewilding, but he just felt like he needed to do something for the planet, and he did what he thought was best and what he could. Now, I'm going to end with the last slide, and then we'll have about 20 minutes, I guess, for interactions, questions, and answers. And this slide, I hope, will inspire you to ask the questions. The young generation can influence their elders and can make them understand the environmental problems that are faced by us today. The youth can make them see that our environment is deteriorating day by day. So your future is in your hands. I'm going to stop sharing this presentation, and then I look forward to your questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. That was such a reflective, sort of a session that you ran us through. And I completely agree with you when you said that man is not separate from nature. And that's a mistake we often tend to make, or maybe from a very young age, where we start to see, man is, we're above the food chain, we're above the pyramid, we're above everything, and we're supposed to sort of dominate. But the real thing is we're right at the center of it, right? And we're all part of nature. That was extremely important for us to hear. And it's only at such a young age that we can sort of generate this sensitivity towards nature by large. Thank you for also sharing your experiences at the polar regions and the pictures that you shared. And the last slide, the last second slide that you shared with the leader of your exploration, where the quote said, something along the lines of, the greatest threat is that we assume that somebody else is going to save our planet. That in fact reminds me of this paradox. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with, but it's called Giddens paradox, right? By the sociologist Anthony Giddens, where he said that, why is a threat of such magnitude routinely ignored by our societies, right? When we know climate change is occurring, when we know that it is an existential crisis, why are we not doing anything about it? And even if we are, why are we not scaling up our restoration? And one of the answers that he said is a lack of tangible, immediate danger from climate change, which means that most of us don't have to take charge. You'll say, okay, maybe the next generation or the generation after that. So why I have to work? But that wouldn't be the most healthy way of looking at it, right? So we will now open, the chat has been open for question and answers. I do have a couple of questions that I have noted that have come in earlier. I will call out your name. Please unmute yourself with your name, your class, question. All right. The first question that we have is from Parth. Parth, can you hear me? Am I audible? Yes, Parth, I can see you. Your hand is raised. Yes.
Yes, ma'am. My question is, what are the natural causes of global warming? We already know what are the man-made causes, but what are the natural causes?
Yeah, well, the Earth has a very dynamic climate system, right? So the natural causes, for example, the greenhouse gas effect, which causes the warming itself, is a natural phenomenon, right? Some of the gas is trapped by some of the radiation of the sun is trapped in the atmosphere, and then that makes the earth warm and suitable for life. But because of a lot of other natural factors, this dynamic weather system keeps changing. There could be more water vapor in the atmosphere in certain point of time. There may be a volcano eruption which could cause a change in the atmosphere. More gases in the more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. There could be a large scale forest burning across the boreal forests, which are the world's largest forests. So there could be a lot of different reasons. In the past, there was a lot of excessive release of methane into the atmosphere, which caused the warming. But these changes happen slowly over hundreds and thousands of years, so that life gets time to evolve. The problem now is that these changes are happening very rapidly in very short period of time. That is what we should be bothered about.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir, and thank you, Parth, for that question. I think the key point is that it's happening at a rapid rate. Natural climate change is part of the Earth's process, but it's happening at a very rapid pace, and that is why we should be worried. Our next question is from Ashwin Gupta. Ashwin Gupta, can you please unmute yourself and pose your question? Also, do let us know which school you are from, Ashwin. All right. Ashwin is not here. Move on to the next question. Okay, we'll come back to Madhav later.
Hello?
Yes, Ashwin,
What do you want to ask me?
did you have a question for us, Ashwin?
Ma'am, I'm Madhav.
Why aren't you talking about PSLV? Today's ISRO launch, EOS 04 and such things, and you are talking about climate change instead.
Ashwin, we will come back to you. Sorry, Madhav, you were asking your question. Yes, Madhav. Madhav, I heard you in between. Okay, so Sir Madhav's question was, does climate change affect the water?
Absolutely. I think, like I said, water is the local issue of global climate change for people and for biodiversity. If you look at the Himalayas, the loss of Himalayan glaciers because of climate change is one of the most worrying consequences for India and the countries around the Himalayan region. Because with the loss of glaciers, we are going to see in the short term a rapid increase in the volume of water flowing in the rivers that originate in the Himalayas. And in the long term, we are likely to see water shortage as well. So besides that, the monsoons depend on a lot of factors, including the sea, including the sea ice in the Arctic. So the loss of sea ice will change the oceanic currents and the winds, and that is going to again affect. In fact, it is already disrupting the South Asian monsoons. So we are seeing more and more frequent and prolonged droughts and less rainfall. In many areas, the kind of precipitation also changes. So in some places we are seeing unseasonal hailstorms. In some places we are seeing extreme rainfall events, whereas in others we are seeing that rainfall has become much scarcer than before.
All right, sir. Thank you. Our next question is from Adya Sharma. Adya Sharma. Adya, I can see your hand raised. I've requested to unmute your mic.
Yes, ma'am. Sir, my question is, what climate change will take place if any one of a layer of the atmosphere disappears?
Well, that's a very interesting question. The atmosphere as a whole plays a vital role in how much of the sun's rays reach our planet, and then at the same time also how much of the reflected radiation is reflected back, and how much of warming, or how much greenhouse gas happens in the atmosphere, right? So if we were to lose a layer of the atmosphere, that is your question, I think that is going to have a disastrous impact in the short term. We might see a rapid disappearance of life on Earth because of intense heat increase.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Adya. Thank you, sir. The next question is from Kevin from Nirma Vidya Vihar School. All right, I will pose the question on behalf of Kevin. Kevin's question is, can climate change affect our equatorial region? And if so, how?
Well, climate change is not limited to a particular region or area in the world. So when we talk about climate change, we are talking about the entire planet. When we talk about global warming, we are talking about the warming of the entire planet, right? The ocean currents and the winds, they move from place to place around the world. So it's like boiling a pan of water, right? The entire water will boil together. You cannot think that only the part which receives the heat from the burner is going to heat up, right? It's all the water in the pan that's going to heat up. So that's the way the atmosphere is. It is one planet, and we have one atmosphere which is regulated by the winds and the ocean currents. So the entire world is going to warm, and then climate change will happen all over together.
Sir, but
our equatorial region is very hot than other climatic regions, so it will affect more hotness in the equatorial region.
Not really. What we have seen that the maximum warming has actually happened in the colder regions. For example, the polar regions have already warmed by up to 5 degrees Celsius. In the Svalbard region of the Arctic, in the last 20 years, we have recorded a 5-degree rise in temperatures. That is because in the colder regions, we have something called a positive feedback loop. For example, when the ice melts, when the sea ice melts, then the white ice is replaced by the dark green water, right, which absorbs heat, whereas the white ice reflects the heat. So that loss of albedo and that enhanced absorption of heat actually causes a rapid increase in temperatures in that particular regions. Similarly, we have seen a 1.3-degree rise in temperatures in the Himalayan region already because number one, we have seen a lot of glacial loss, and number two, the ice has darkened because of the deposit of black carbon, which has decreased the albedo. So these positive feedback loops happens in the higher reaches, mostly in the polar regions, which is causing this rapid rise in temperatures.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Kevin. Thank you, sir, for clarifying that as well. It was, I think it's a very relevant query that Kevin had raised. So our last question for today would be for you to quickly tell us in brief. I know it's a lot to talk about with the expeditions, but if you could share
Sorry.
which were the for you.
Sorry, I could not get your question.
Am I audible now, sir?
Yeah, you are.
Yes. So my question was, could you, in a nutshell, summarize your experience at the polar regions, and what was the most challenging, or what were you expecting, which sort of went different from what you were expecting, or what came true?
Well, I would say both the expeditions were quite different. In Antarctica, I saw the remains of the Larsen B ice shelf, actually, which started to break away in the year 2002 when a lot of people did not believe in climate change. But when I saw the remains of that ice shelf in 2013, it really immediately got me back to what is happening in my region in Assam, where we already saw a civil war-like situation because of migration of displaced people from Bangladesh. So we know that Bangladesh is the most vulnerable country to sea level rise, and the possibilities of recurrence of such civil wars in the future is very much correct. In fact, a lot of the coastal areas around the world will become uninhabitable. They will be submerged, forcing people to migrate. So there may be a lot of societal conflicts in the future that is actually unavoidable. So it gave me understanding of the challenges that we are going to face in the future. In the Arctic, I think one of the most dramatic thing that I saw was the global seed vault. That was something that was constructed by with the view to protect humanity from unforeseen calamities in the future. So they made this huge underground vault, which was supposed to store seeds from all the food crops and different types of plants and trees for eternity, so that in case of some huge calamity, a huge natural or man-made disaster, human beings will still have a chance to recover in the future. But within a few years, within I think 6 or 7 years after it was built, there were cracks because of avalanches, because of because ice has melted and there were rock falls and things that were not anticipated. So something that was built to last forever was destroyed, and that reminded me of how small we are really in front of nature. The most well planned structures, the most protective building that was supposed to protect humanity in the future actually collapsed, cracked within a few years. And that kind of made me realize that, we are basically helpless in front of nature. So I think these were really eye-opening, and makes it very, very important that we understand that what happens in the Arctic is going to affect us all. The loss of sea ice is going to affect how the weathers evolve around the world. It's going to affect sea level rise, and indirectly it's going to affect food security, and I think the entire well-being of human society.
All right, sir. That was I've read about the seed vault that you were talking about. I did read
Mhm.
about it being destroyed, there being cracks. But
Yeah.
I completely forgot about it. It didn't strike me until you brought it up. And it is quite disheartening to know. And like for us, we hear about it, we read about it, we see pictures. We've seen pictures of polar bears, standing on like a small piece of ice, and everything else is melting and forming water. But you've seen it yourself. So I can only imagine the scale and the magnitude of this heartbreak that you've seen. And like you said, beyond a point, how much or what can we do? We are ultimately helpless when nature strikes. So the least we can do is try and minimize the harm that we are causing, and hopefully nature will take care of
Yes,
us. Um,
absolutely.
yes. And the last question that I would ask, I know a lot of people say that global warming is a hoax or it's a scam. Um, and it's something that I'm obviously not going to debate on. But what would your take be to people who say that it is a scam?
Well, I just say that follow the science. Uh, 97 or maybe more now, 99% of scientists say that climate change is happening. So suppose you are crossing a bridge and 99 people tell you that the bridge is going to collapse. Would you still take the chance with that 1% of negativity and try to cross the bridge? I don't think so. I think it is time to stop that debate and really see how we can all join forces to ensure that the worst catastrophic impacts are avoided.
Yes, and like you said, prevention is always better than cure, right? Why give it a chance? Why stretch our hypothesis and say, oh, it's a hoax? Might as well do something and save the planet, instead of sort of getting stuck in the situation and then trying to save ourselves. Thank you so much, sir. It was an absolute honor to have you with us. Thank you, students, for all your questions. I know the chat box had several questions. We obviously can't answer everything, but please do ensure that you follow the resources that sir has guided you in. And also thank you for the teachers resource. I think that is going to be extremely helpful personally for me and all the other teachers and principals who have joined us. I'll definitely have a look and read the book that you sort of wrote the chapter in.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you
so
very
much.
much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Students, kindly stay back. I just have a few instructions regarding your next session. Please tell me if my screen is visible to you.
Yes, it is.
Yes, all right. Thank you, Gayatri. So please, tell us how you liked this program. Give us your views, give us your comments. You can log on to our Facebook page. You can review us on Google. If you can't, please ask your parents to do so. Talk to them about our session today. tell them what you thought about, and they can obviously always review it for us. Your next session will be on the 17th of February between 5 and 6 p.m. And the topic for that session is geology and its impact on daily life. Our keynote speaker for that day would be Dr. Meenal Mishra. She's a geoscientist. So I hope to see all of you on the 17th of February between 5 and 6 p.m. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you have a lovely evening. Enjoy your day at school tomorrow, and we'll see you on the 17th. Thank you so much.